Federal Executive Council approves concession of Abuja Kano airports.
This draft civil aviation policy is geared towards opening up the industry in line with the EU Agenda 2063.
Senate calls on the central bank to pay up blocked funds to airlines.
Cheap tickets are not available in Nigeria because taxes and inflation will have eroded the profit.
National Association of Resident Doctors commenced a 5-day warning strike yesterday.
One of the things that we are asking for is a good infrastructure in our tertiary institutions.
Good Morning Nigeria today discusses how to resolve perennial industrial crisis in Nigeria.
Strike or industrial action, as it is otherwise known, is legitimate action of workers to agitate unfavorable policies or programs of the employer.
Now, this right of the worker has been exercised over the years, and workers, of course, continue to press home their demands, mostly in an organized society, because it is protected by law as long as such actions, of course, are within the framework provided by statutes that will stipulate the conditions and circumstances under which workers could stop work.
Now, sealing a memorandum of understanding with employers of labor is enough reason for industrial unions to suspend industrial action, whereas it is a failure. Partial or non-implementation of such agreements obviously may become a threat to stability in workplaces.
Well, in Nigeria, cases of recurring industrial actions and, of course, decades of unfulfilled agreements have now become a peculiar problem, as it were, and that problem has, as it were, defied solution, particularly in the health and education sectors.
The two sectors, broadly characterized as social sector because of the benefits they offer to the general public, have witnessed more industrial actions than any sector of the Nigerian economy. Therefore, a few days of strike by hospitals and education institutions are felt immediately by the people because of the peculiarity of the sectors as the social services providers that affect everyday lives of the people.
Now, there are many who believe that the importance of those two sectors often informs government's quick response to resolving whatever disputes that arise in the meantime and restoring smooth operations. But, of course, usually there's many a time when there is lack of consideration, it is argued, for long-term implications of some of the agreements that are sometimes hurriedly entered into.
And for example, in 2020, ASU was on strike for about 9 months and about 8 months in 2022 for almost the same reason, including the renegotiation of the 2009 federal government ASU agreement and deployment of the University Transparency and Accountability Solution, UTAS, among others.
Well, at present, the joint health sector unions and assembly of healthcare professional associations have issued a 15-day ultimatum over inconsistencies, they allege, by the federal government in the ongoing negotiations to adjust the consolidated health salary structure for workers in that sector.
And consequently, the unions yesterday, Wednesday, May 17th, commenced an industrial action, and the consequences on service seekers are looming. So the question on the lips of many is, can industrial action ever end in Nigeria, or what are the other better options needed towards managing employer and employee dispute in Nigeria? And how can the existing agreement issues between government and labor unions be resolved, considering the fact that the economy, the system of the nation, and indeed the world appears unstable? Kinsley.
Well, very pertinent issues that you have raised there, and anyone, of course, who's been in this economy would know that There are several thousands, if not millions of man-hours that are lost annually on account of work stoppages. And we hear very little of lockouts, because employers are also entitled to lock out employees,
Yes.
but the circumstances for that also have to be fulfilled as prescribed by law. But it's on account of the industrial crisis that is perennial in the economy that we're taking a look at the subject matter today and what needs to be done. Why is it, the question has often arisen, that a strike that is said to be the last resort for employees in their negotiations or in their contact with their employers would appear now to have become usually the first option. That's the note on which we welcome you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Jumo Yusuf. We have a complimentary segment, but first let's join Comfort and Madu for the highlights of the morning news. Hello, Comfort.
Hello, Jumai and Kingsley. Good morning, Nigerians. Let's bring you some of the news development. As a demonstration of his commitment to advancing healthcare management in the country, President Muhammadu Buhari will on Friday, May the 19th, inaugurate the state-of-the-art presidential VIP wing of the State House Medical Center, Abuja. In a statement from Abiodun Oladunjoye, Director Information, this legacy project situated within the premises of the presidential villa had its groundbreaking ceremony conducted by the Chief of Staff to the President, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, on November 1st, 2021, spanning an impressive total floor area of 2,485 square meters on a suspended floor with basement. And the hospital, which serves as a specialized intensive care center, caters for the president, vice president, their immediate families and VIPs, and incorporates state-of-the-art medical technology with a total cost amounting to 21 billion naira. Completed well on schedule and within budget, the VIP wing also showcases a catheterization laboratory, 2 operating rooms for regular procedures and special procedures such as organ transplants. Following the ribbon cutting ceremony, President Buhari, accompanied by the Permanent Secretary of the State House, Tijani Omar, will embark on a guided tour of the hospital, and guests invited to the inauguration ceremony are expected to be seated by 9 a.m. prompt. In other news, the National Association of Resident Doctors has commenced a 5-day warning strike. Hakimat Ali visited the National Hospital, Abuja, for a situation report.
One of the things that we are asking for is a good infrastructure in our tertiary institutions. You cannot be a doctor and you don't have good things to work with. And also, we are also asking for replacements of people, doctors, and even other clinical staffs who are living in drones. And it is telling on our health, it is telling on our psyche, and it's really affecting us. So we want government to do the needful.
The Federal Executive Council has approved the concession of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, and Malam Aminu Kano International Airport, Kano, for a period of 20 to 30 years, respectively. Also approved is a draft national policy on civil aviation for the country. Minister of Aviation Hadi Sirika announced this while briefing journalists after another round of extraordinary meeting of the council. Also, the council approved the reintroduction of the park and pay policy in the FCT.
So the total amount of money that is coming accruing to government is $700 million for Abuja, and then $97.4 million for Kano. Put together is about $800 million, and this is equal to the amount of money that we borrow to do those 4 airports. This draft civil aviation policy is geared towards opening up the industry in line with the EU Agenda 2063 to integrate Africa through civil aviation and to promote entrepreneurship.
And one of the fallout of increasing airlines blocked funds in Nigeria is high cost of tickets. In reaction, Senate has urged President Muhammadu Buhari to direct the Central Bank of Nigeria to pay up these blocked funds.
The consequence of these block funds are that cheap tickets are not available in Nigeria because taxes and inflation will have eroded the profit when the funds are kept for a very long time.
So international obligation we have with the airlines to remit the monies they have. We are also doing businesses in all of these countries. And I think it's not very good for Nigeria and for our image, for Nigeria to be owing or to not be remitting monies when they are due.
Definitely there is something wrong. If our neighboring countries that are not as economically vibrant or buoyant as our own economy are getting a better deal, then there should be things they are doing perhaps that are right, and in our own case there are things that are happening that are not right.
The House of Representatives has received presidential request to approve an $800 million United States loan facility from the World Bank for the benefit of more Nigerians under the National Social Safety Net program. If approved, 10.4 million poor and vulnerable households are expected to benefit from the intervention.
The federal government of Nigeria, under the conditional cash transfer window of the program, will transfer the sum of 5,000 naira per month to 10.2 million poor and low-income households for a period of 6 months, with a multiplier effect of about 60 million individuals.
President-elect Bola Tinubu has promised to ensure the unification of the country and to work towards ensuring continued positive relations with the United States. The president-elect made the promise during a telephone conversation with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Tinubu said that among his immediate priorities would be to deliver institutional reforms and development programs to deepen democratic institutions and bring help to the poor and vulnerable Nigerians. During the talks that lasted about 20 minutes, President-elect Tinubu affirmed his democratic credentials and expressed his absolute belief that the results of the elections, which he clearly won, reflected the will of the Nigerian people. He said he would work to unite the country and ensure that Nigerians are happy and enjoy the benefits of democracy and progressive good governance. The incoming president urged the U.S. to factor in Nigerians' important place in Africa and provide the required assistance in the areas of security and economic investment in order for the nation to lead the way and be a shining example in the rest of the continent. And Secretary Blinken assured that Nigeria should expect a good and mutually beneficial relationship with the U.S. Federal government has condemned the attack on the convoy of the staffers of the United States. Of staffers of U.S. consulate in Ogbaru, local government area of Anambra State, by unidentified gunmen. The incident occurred on Tuesday, the 16th of May, 2023, and led to the death of 2 policemen and 2 locally recruited staff of the consulate. While investigation is ongoing to bring the perpetrators to book, the federal government extends its condolences to the families of the deceased as well as to the U.S. consulate and mission in Nigeria over the irreparable loss. In a statement by the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Francisca Omayuli, says the government remains undaunted by this sad development and reiterates its commitment in the continuous fight against all forms of criminality in the country. That's the news. Stay tuned for more on Good Morning Nigeria with Kingsley and Jumai after this break. Good morning.
As I stand before you, I don't have a diplomatic passport. Not because I don't want it, not because I cannot have it, but because I don't want to get indulged. Pure and simple. I want to be a citizen of a country. And that citizenship is the simplicity of living within the realm of your effort. Please, let's build Nigeria together.
the launching and presentation of 2 new books, State of Repair, How Muhammadu Buhari Tried to Change Nigeria for Good by Anthony Goldman, and The Legacy of Muhammadu Buhari by Senator Abu Ibrahim, is scheduled as follows. Venue, State House Conference Center, Aso Rock Villa. Date, Friday, 19th May 2023. Time, 9:30 a.m. Special guest of honor, President Commander-in-Chief Muhammadu Buhari. Chairman of the occasion, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana. Expected at the event are His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President-elect, and His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, the Vice President-elect. Attendance will be strictly by invitation. Announcer, Ambassador Babagana Kingibe GCON, Chairman, Organizing Committee.
The Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chairman of Presidential Transition Council, Boss Mustafa CFR, invites members of the Council, Chairmen and members of various subcommittees of the Council, civil society organizations, the media and other stakeholders to the World Press Conference to unveil the approved program of events for the 2023 presidential inauguration as follows. Date, Thursday, 18th May 2023. Venue, Rotunda Hall, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Tafawa Balewa Way, Central Business District, Abuja. Time, 2 p.m. Announcer, Mrs. Lydia Shehu Jafia, MNI, Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Information and Culture, and Chairperson, Media and Publicity Subcommittee for Presidential Transition Council.
This is the University of Africa. On the streets, you get your real education. Here, everybody has a degree of something. But the most important qualification is imagination. Her reason to imagine is slay. His reason is to be the GOAT. Theirs is to take the beat and make it lit. They want to test edgy till it is fire. Their reason for imagination is to add riz in style. Her reason to imagine is finesse. And hers is to find what's new and bussin'. So no matter what your situation, just use your imagination.
The Council of Our Fathers.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
Nigeria is a country of many cultures, languages and beliefs. But despite our differences, there is one thing that unites us all, our love for this great nation. Sometimes we may feel that we need to go fast and go alone. But when we come together and work as a team, we can go far beyond what we ever thought was possible. United, we can create thriving businesses that benefit our communities and in turn, our nation. It is said that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Let's understand our differences and come together to build a better Nigeria. When we work together, there is nothing we can't achieve. Nigeria, better together.
This message is powered by the Presidential Transition Council, PTC.
Thanks for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria, and up next is business news as federal government launches revised national agricultural seed policy. Let's get the details with Alika Okmanachi Arua.
The federal government has launched the revised National Agricultural Seed Policy 2022 to liberalize the seed subsector and enhance private sector participation in its development. The Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Dr. Mohammed Abubakar, during the launch of the policy in Abuja, said the 2022 revised policy was developed following a critical review of the 2015 National Seed Policy. He stated that the review became necessary due to the positive changes in the operations of the seed industry, especially after the enactment of the National Agricultural Seed Act of 2019 and the Plant Variety Protection Act of 2021 that confine new responsibilities and widen the scope of operations of the National Agricultural Seed Council. Meanwhile, stakeholders in the human resource value chain canvasses African Continental Free Trade Area implementation with the potential to leapfrog Africa's economic growth if properly implemented. Experts have charted on how the African Continental Free Trade Area could be exploited to grow local talents and make Africa stand tall as a global hub. In another development, BRICS nations of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are looking to establish a new reserve currency. What does this mean for the dominance of the US dollar and indeed the global economy?
You stand to gain a lot when you occupy a place of pride in the Committee of Nations. And what puts you there? I mean, the dollar was there when the naira was exchanging at a higher level to the dollar. You had the dollar. Okay, when we are with the pound, it's all about production. All right, it's what you're bringing to the table. The dollar is bringing oil, which is central, which is critical, okay, to the table. So anybody who wants to weaken it, and if we want to gain, we must be able to find that new prosperity pathways that can be able to now give our currency, some level, of weight.
With business news, Alika Opanachi, Arua.
That was the business news package on Good Morning Nigeria. A review of some of the papers we have this morning comes up next.
Now, newspaper reviewer Chukudi Okole Upaja is in the studio. Good morning, Chukudi.
I hope I'm showing well enough in this seat.
Exactly, you are.
Yes. Thank you. Morning.
Morning.
Has the seat been changed?
I wonder.
Some people occasionally.
What happened to you overnight?
A friend of mine.
Sorry. What happened to you overnight?
A friend
you
of
flew
mine
overnight or something?
Practically called me pint size Maltex bottle. Make a roller.
No. I was asking you because you've always used that same chair, that same seat, and you never complained about whether you were fitting in or whether it was too deep for you to be comfortable in. So that's why I'm asking. What happened to you? Did you fly last night?
Kingsley, I didn't. I knew you were going there. I didn't fly last night. I'm a good man. You can see all that.
You're not a closet wizard. You can't fly.
Oh, don't forget. You remember there was a statement issued by the White Witches and Wizards Association based in Calabar. I said the other time, guaranteed Tinubu of no issues
with the inauguration.
Ahead of and at his inauguration.
Kingsley, don't take it to Calabar. It first happened in Benin City. Eboho, White Witches. They said they were going to release about 3 drums of Hamatan. Kingsley, when they said they released the first drum, we stopped seeing. We thank God they didn't get to the second drum. It happened in Benin City first, before Calabar.
No, hang on. What you are saying, that was a good deed.
Chukudi, you got him there. You know, he was hanging. His mouth was hanging.
I mean, he had said that before. I mean, it was a good deed. It wasn't destructive. It was a good deed to show the power of the force of nature.
But it all started
because when the Almighty created the world, He created the world, and man eventually said, "Go take charge of what I created."
But it all began in Benin, not Calabar.
No, it could have started.
We have to accept that.
No, but if you say it started in Benin, hang on a second.
Yes.
Chukudi is familiar with this saying.
Yes.
When Benin people say Edo or Isiagbon,
what does it mean?
That's what I want to tell you. That Benin is the center of the universe. The center. That's everything starts from there. And so that's the good And then, of course, the further away it is, then the bad begins to manifest.
So the Garden of Eden started from there.
Africa and storytelling.
Okay, let's quickly go through the papers. You start or I begin?
No, begin.
Okay, let me begin with the Punch newspaper this morning, and above the mat's head, we have, I regret backing Tambuwal to become speaker. That's coming from the present Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila. You find the details on page 8. 7 banks fined 1 billion naira for forex offences. Find the details on page 23. Matawali urges EFCC to probe presidency officials and ministers. Find details on page 7. And below the masthead, PDP Labour Party kick as U.S. Secretary of State calls Tinubu. PDP Labour Party kick as U.S. Secretary of State calls Tinubu with riders. U.S. promises continued comprehensive security, economic cooperation. Atiku LP Barrett Blanken say phone call demoralizing and worrisome. You find the details all on page 2. The picture story you see there, confusion as Labour factions clash at tribunal. You can see the picture illustration there. And going down, the Punch newspaper at the bottom plate, Minister carpets resident doctors as strike grounds hospitals. You find details on page 22. U.S. demands justice for slain consulate officials. You read all about that on page 7. Varsity admission with tears. Direct entry applicants sleep rough at JAMB office. Varsity admission with tears. Direct entry applicants sleep rough at JAMB office. You find the details on page 3. Let's quickly go to the Leadership newspaper. And below the masthead, 11 days to go. U.S. assures Tinubu of mutually beneficial ties. Atiku kicks. 11 days to go. U.S. assures Tinubu of mutually beneficial ties. Atiku kicks. You find the details on page 7. And the picture story you see there, founding partner Future Africa and others at a conference in celebration of Momo's first anniversary in Lagos yesterday. And the headlines in the Leadership newspaper, Nigeria heading for debt crisis. Governors warn. With kickers, say debt servicing taking 95% of revenue. As PNB seeks reps approval for $800 million World Bank loan. Gwandu becomes vice chairman of Nasene. You find details on page 6. Resident doctors warning strike cripples public hospitals. Resident doctors warning strike cripples public hospitals. You find details on page 6. And Plateau attack, 85 persons given mass burial. Plateau attack, 85 persons given mass burial. You find details on page 7. Kingsley.
We also have the New Telegraph newspaper, and as always, the front page of the paper is crowded with stories. That's the headlines especially. Now, above the nameplate, let's take one of the headlines there. It says, Naira at growing risk of devaluation in coming weeks. And then below that, Nigeria loses $1 billion yearly to non-certification of agro-produce for export. Electoral Justice, NLC debunks alleged plan to shut down Nigeria. And former Methodist prelate Sunday Mbang dies at 86. NAS leadership crisis, that's the kicker. APC moves to break G6 and opposition alliance, opts for open contests and to brief Tinubu and governors. Wasi, Betara, Jaji and others closing on consensus. Concessions, federal government to make $17.83 billion from 3 ports, $797 million from Abuja and Kano airports. And Senate asks CBN to release $717.4 million trapped airlines funds. Insecurity, U.S. condemns attack on missions convoy in Nigeria, confirms 4 casualties, vows to bring gunmen to justice. We're committed to fishing out killers, that's according to President Buhari. 2023, PDP sets up committee on alleged anti-party activities by G5 and others. Patients stranded at Lasuth as resident doctors' strike begins. Bauchi patients cry out for help, urges federal government to intervene. Now, that is Association of Resident Doctors President threatens indefinite action unless Presidential Tribunal, that's the Election Petition Tribunal, Tinubu opposes live coverage of proceedings and says application and abuse of tribunal processes. Again, tribunal adjourns hearing of Obi's petition to Friday. No end in sight to LP's leadership crisis as factions clash at tribunal. Party disowns Apapa. Blue light from smart screens may harm skin health. That's according to a study published on page 8. Chukwudi.
Thank you, Kingsley. And may I start on a funereal note? Pardon me. Methodist prelate Sunday Mbang is gone. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Let's quickly recall, I don't know whether you gentleman and lady have mentioned it, Chris Mba, the musician.
Yes, Chris, yeah, he passed away, was it last week or the week before?
You know, Kingsley, when I was in those boogie shoes, you know, Gatsby, cap, and, you know, when we kicked around, baby, don't cry, please don't cry. You should have seen me in those days. Then he came with another one. Chuku kelu wekege kosicho. Magenye konwe ginsobu chinoko yene. Life is patience and perseverance.
Yeah, Chris Mba was a great guy. May his soul also rest in peace. I think he was on a mission. I can't remember what crowded out of our conversation on the headlines and the papers. The day after he passed away, we've had a number of deaths now, particularly in the entertainment world.
Peter Obi, what's his name? Sent Obi. I said Peter, they shouldn't come across.
Sent to be is gone, and you have a number of other actors and actresses.
Within the week.
Yes. There's another guy from the southwest.
Yes,
his name escapes me now.
Yes,
about 3 of them were mentioned.
That's right. That's right.
But gentlemen, let me quickly.
We can't say that. I mean, I was fascinated hearing you. I listened to his music, but I never really danced to it.
I did.
And then I had outgrown that genre of music. So.
You had outgrown it?
Yes,
Kingsley, let's not start another furor
every generation
on individual preferences. Quickly, retirees, others lured into Ponzi schemes. I don't know why some of us have decided that this country should become a Kalu country. A man labors through his career and he thinks that the 5 million or 7 million he got as benefits on end of service should be pushed into something where 1 penny will give him 6 pence. Kingsley, remember, Rise and Shine, Money Tree and all that. They didn't see Chukwudi's 1 kobo. I can't be short and senseless at the same time. You know, they didn't get it. But the point I'm making is, why do we believe in gambling so much? And our children are now flooding this football, sports betting centers and all that. And it doesn't seem to worry us.
No. It should, actually.
Where are we headed? Where are we headed?
No, well, Chukwudi, thanks for raising this. There are 2 issues you have raised. Ponzi schemes don't amount to gambling.
Oh, really?
In a sense, yeah. Not gambling, stricto sensu. We have discussed the issue of gambling on Good Morning Nigeria.
Yes.
We brought in operators of betting companies. We also brought in psychologists and psychiatrists to have a conversation on that subject matter. This was a couple of years ago on Good Morning Nigeria. Now, for the Ponzi schemes, some of the earlier variants you mentioned that operated about 30 years ago, Umana, you saw that in Akwa Ibom, in Rivers, Arise and Shine, Money Tree, all of those
Money Tree.
Now,
Honeywell.
MMM was one of the latest that happened some years ago in Nigeria. There are 2 things at play. The get-rich-quick syndrome. Get rich quick. You are promised mouth-watering returns on your investment.
Within 24 hours.
Within 20, well, usually they will tell you within 1 month, and then it's supposed to be multi-layered. You go and bring in multiple other investors, and you are not asking yourself the basic question. The monies that they are collecting from you as deposit, how is that money working to generate the mouth-watering interest that you are promised?
It's more than geometric. It's unnatural.
It's unnatural.
You were talking about the MMM,
yes.
That's the Mavrodi Mondial movement.
Yes, you know, so it was a Russian guy, well, I think the guy is late now. So the Securities and Exchange Commission warns from time to time for persons not to get involved. And I think that what is important is to seek out operators of these Ponzi schemes, know where they are, grab them, and then let them face the law. That's part of what is required. But the group of pensioners you've talked about, look, pensioners are very vulnerable people. Let's be realistic. Quite vulnerable. Which is why even in the formal scheme of contributory pension, at a certain age, your pension funds cannot be invested by law, cannot be placed in certain kinds of investment. Because if they are high-risk investments...
Risky business.
If they are high-risk investments, formally, that should say you have a fund manager, you want to invest, they cannot put it there. Because, again, once, of course, the risk factor, then how many years you have left to say, okay, let me go and recoup. And then for you personally as an individual, the other day we were talking about mental health.
Yes.
By the time people begin to age, sometimes their critical thinking faculties
sets in.
Diminish.
And dementia.
Yes.
Diminish. And that is why some of these 419ers are also able to con persons abroad, and some of their victims are usually older persons.
Yes.
That's the point.
It's global, but for a domestic problem, the thing is never to relent. The EFCC has its job well cut out for it, and indeed other law enforcement agents. Because we all pray to get old, and you don't want any person to come. The same thing, you see people who are old, the way the other persons would deal with their landed properties. The man has nothing to do, and you give him a document that they have conned him, and the next thing is gone.
It's unfortunate.
Big time.
Well, Chukudi, thank you
We
so
seem
much.
to have run out of time.
Yes, we have. The only issue, the story about concessioning of the ports and then at the airports, Abuja and Kano, the stories are very skimpy inside. I do hope I will find the paper where I will read the stories in greater detail.
Did it arrive late yesterday? I was wondering why the papers are
no, the stories were on pages 4 and 5. It was approved by the Federal Executive Council. What is the role of the NCP in this? That's the National Council on Privatization. Because I know that they deal with aspects of concessioning, they also deal with aspects of privatization, and so on and so forth. This one, I don't know. So those are issues that, I'm just saying this because somebody might wake up 6 months' time and say, no, this thing didn't go through the proper procedure, or that some of the
bit
things
I
were
had
not
on it, which
tidied
is a
up.
one-liner.
And then they will go to court.
The bit I have on is a one-liner, please. Somebody is saying, are they likely to deliver Niger Air before May 29 or May 29?
Well, the minister said so.
Why the minister said so. But why stampede Hadisirika or the government? Governments should be seen as a continuum. Nobody is going to deny the fact that this government has provided the bulwark of what is eventually going to create the green, white, green going in into the air again, you know, in the name of a national carrier. So let's not get obsessed with when it happens.
Let's just hope that it's done well.
Oh, that's the important thing.
Keeping safety of Nigerians in mind.
Yes.
Well, that's how it's been on the newspaper review. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
From north to south, from east to west, we share one blood in our veins. The blood of Nigeria, Nigeria's blood, proud and strong. We stand together, we belong together, we cherish our diversity, we celebrate our unity, we honor our history, we shape our destiny. We are Nigerians, Nigerian mothers, fathers, sons and daughters, brave and free. We love our country, we live by our fierce, unique bond. This is our blood.
Nigeria, better together.
This message is powered by the Presidential Transition Council, PTC.
My name is School Fred Jeremy Pats. I'm one of the Empower beneficiaries. The name of school I'm here is Government School, Abia Ponkap, Abuja Government, Akwa Ibom State. I'm a young graduate since 2015. I was after the service. Since that 2015, I went to service 15, finished by 2016. I was looking for a job. I would meet some different firms where they cannot accept me. So I was now looking for other small business to do. I just heard the information on net that the president is doing it to have 1 million youth to empower. It was online registration. After that, you upload everything through net. At the end of it now, they shortlisted me. So I went for physical verification. After that, they are now giving me the posting, post me to my primary assignment, NTA.
Your skill is key to your professional growth in the competitive broadcast media industry. Take advantage of the following programs specially packaged by NTA Television College Jos to upgrade your skill. Computer General Application. Date 8 May to 19th May 2023, 2 weeks. English Grammar and Pronunciation for Broadcasters. Date 22nd May to 9th June 2023, 3 weeks. Basic Broadcast Accounting and Auditing. Date 22nd May to 9th June 2023, 3 weeks. Marketing in the Era of Digital Broadcast. Date 13th June to 23rd June 2023, 2 weeks. Drama Production Workshop. Date 3rd July to 21st July 2023, 3 weeks. Intermediate Online News Reporting Skills. Date 24th July to 11th August 2023, 3 weeks. The course fee for the 2-week course is 120,000 naira, while the fee for the 3-week course is 150,000 naira only. Accommodation inclusive. All courses will hold at NTA Television College near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos. For further inquiries, please call 0803 079 5335 or 0806 980 9807. NTA Television College Jos, training you to be the best you want to be. Registrar Announcer.
The Council of Our Fathers.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
Honestly, words cannot express how we feel. Before the bridge, the road from here, Nasarawa to Loko, is about 74 kilometers. This is the link between Nasarawa and Loko. The bridge, which is about 35 kilometers across the river Benue, has been on for about 10 years now. Before now, if you live here for Loko, 74 kilometers, and somebody leaves Nasarawa for Kaduna, he will get to Kaduna before you get to Loko. The implication of the completion of this bridge is the cutting of the travel distance by about 3 hours. Our people from Nasarawa can now travel from here to Onitsha and come back on the same day. The economic and social consequences of this milestone development can hardly be compared to the ease with which people move has opened the area, and many people are coming around now to invest in agriculture. Where to score this government on this achievement, we will score them extremely high because it has changed the dynamics of the social and economic activities of our people.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the NTA. Let's now join Oyeyemi Ajayi for a peep into our conversation on resolving perennial industrial action.
Yesterday, the Joint Health Sector Unions, an assembly of healthcare professional associations, commenced an industrial action, otherwise known as a strike. This was after having issued a 15-day strike ultimatum over alleged inconsistencies by the federal government in the ongoing negotiations to adjust the consolidated health salary structure for health workers on their platforms. The consequence of the strike action is beginning to be felt across the length and breadth of the country. This strike is coming just months after the conclusion of the 8-month strike by the Academic Union of Universities, ASU. It would be recalled that the strike, which commenced on Monday, February 14, 2022, led to a suspension of academic activities in federal and state universities across the country. Until Friday, October 14, 2022, when it was called off. Sadly, Strikes have become the new normal in Nigeria in recent times, as strike action is mostly seen as the most effective way of getting the authorities to bend to the wishes of workers. According to a 2021 report from the Trade Union Services and Industrial Relations Department of the Federal Ministry of Labor, about 103 labor complaints and trade disputes were recorded. Out of these, 14 resulted in strike actions. The total number of disputes that would have led to strikes resolved was only 7. However, about 74% of these disputes were public sector based, while about 26% were private sector based. These statistics contextualize the problem and evidences of the prevalence of industrial conflicts in Nigeria. Some experts maintain that while strike or industrial action is a legitimate action of workers to agitate unfavorable policies or programs of the employer, the health and education sectors bears the brunt of strike action over the years.
There's a right to strike. They have the right. You can't deny it to them. But the employer has another right under Section 43 of the Trade Dispute Act. He will seize your money. He won't pay you.
Are there other available options rather than strikes? How can the incoming administration stem the culture of strikes going forward? These will form the crux of discussions as guests on the program speak to the perennial industrial actions in Nigeria shortly.
That was actually Abdul Salam Jibril with the backgrounder for today's conversation. We have guests, of course, here in the studios and joining us from remote locations. Here in Abuja, I would like to welcome our regular, Comrade Issa Aremu. Comrade Issa Aremu is the Director General of the Michael Imodu Labour Institute in Ilorin, Kwara State. Comrade Aremu, good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
It's a pleasure, Kingsley.
Okay.
All right. Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay. Also part of the conversation this morning with us via Zoom is a former president of the Trade Union Congress. That's Comrade Peter Esele. Comrade Peter Esele, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me and good morning.
All right. Well, your Zoom connection is crisp at this moment, so we better take advantage of it. Comrade Issa Aremu is right here with us face to face. And so we'll engage him and detain him for the remainder of the conversation. So, Comrade Peter Esele, I mean, when we started today's program, my colleague and I were bantering and just restating what everyone in Nigeria knows, that it looks like the country is under the grip of endless industrial actions, and the crisis follows one another, one sector after another sector. We're quite familiar with what is happening in health. We also know what happens with ASU and so on and so forth. And more importantly, strike, as many would argue, ordinarily should be the last resort for workers. But it would appear that this is usually the first recourse, the so-called warning strike, followed by prolonged, sometimes weeks on end and sometimes months on end in the case of the Academic Staff Union of Universities. Have we lost something about industrial management in this country?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. I think, yes, we have lost something. But again, if you go by your report, it said 76%, 74% of the actions are majorly in the public sector, while the remaining 26% is in the private sector. So which probably means the private sectors are doing something right. For them to have 26%, while the federal government or the public sector are doing certain things that is also not right. So what is missing? What is missing is lack of respect for agreements. Now, issues, you just made reference to people going on warning strike. The first thing they did was to issue a warning, an ultimatum. And for that 2 weeks ultimatum that was issued, there was no response. And you find out that that is majorly what happened in the public sector. They don't react when they are supposed to act. So what you have now is that the only thing that the workers have is to go on strike. But would that happen in the private sector? that the chances of that happening in the private sector is like 15 to 20%, that they will not act immediately. So what you have missing is trust. Federal government or the public sector managers of industrial harmony don't have the confidence of the workers. So you have lack of trust, and you also have policy inconsistency. I just watched the Minister of Labor saying that you have a right to strike, but we also have a right to withhold your money. So if you want to do it that way, what you are also creating is you're also creating disharmony. So the first thing that I will expect government to do is, what are the agreements? Stick to your agreements. And once you stick to your agreement, you build trust, you build harmony. It's different for you to think in terms, the way the minister is thinking, why I was laughing was, he's thinking in terms of HR. There's a difference between human resource, which is black and white, and industrial relations. Industrial relations simply means that every factors of production working in harmony. So you don't have a fast rule to hold on to. All you need to do is to ensure that everything is in harmonious. Now look at what is happening. Whether in France there is protest, whether in the UK there is strikes. So there are strikes all over the world, but it is the process of the strike that should concern us. Is the public sector doing enough, or is the private sector doing enough? Then what can we do better? That should be our area of concentration.
Yes, indeed, you've raised some pertinent questions here, and I believe before any organization goes on strike, there's a negotiation, there's a meeting. It takes quite a long time. You know, people always say the civil service is the engine room of government. My question is, why is the engine not being serviced well?
The engine is also not, we also need to look at the training. I think we also have to speak to that. If the public sector is actually taking advantage of Michael Imodu Labor Institute, which has to do with training, capacity building. Okay, I work with the oil and gas. It's normal when I was there. It's normal. That's a private sector company. It's normal at the big for every year. Both the management and the union will undergo a training program. And that training program is built so that you have an understanding. Both parties have an understanding. You know where the union is coming from. We have this thing that we say, first, the company must exist for us to get paid. And then the management also will agree that the workers must also exist and live well for them to increase production or have an enhanced productivity. So what you have now is that both the employee and the employers now know that their relationship is symbiotic. While in the public sector, from our own experience, is that the public sector has what I call, they are so aloof and lackadaisical in their approach to industrial relations. I will ask you, how many times, go check out, how many times have they taken advantage of Michael Imodu? What is the training? While you have the private sector workers or those in the union, continuous improvement. Why don't you always have problems of shutdown in oil and gas? A lot of people don't take attention to look at, you can have oil workers coming out to threaten, but you actually don't get to that level where they clamp down and shut down. It's because of the relationship between the employers and the employees. So both sides now understand themselves. And it makes it easier for them to, you must judge, just like the tongue and the teeth. There's always a disagreement, but they must coexist. So what we know, what we have to do is, first of all, capacity building, especially in the public sector. Especially in the public sector.
All right, Comrade Peter Isele, thank you very much there for the insights that you have provided. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's return to the studios. Comrade Isarebo, place all of this in context. In our previous conversations, which we have participated, we've touched briefly here and there on some of the causative factors of the unending industrial disharmony in our economy. What are, in your opinion, those other factors that continue to act as drivers of the crisis?
Thank you so much, Kingsley. I think Comrade Peter Isele has also addressed some of the drivers. Lack of social dialogue, lack of capacity for negotiation, not just on the part of the workers, even some employers, government officials. You know, we have to build knowledge gap on labor relations. And as he said, human relation, HR, is different from industrial relations. Industrial relation deals with how to handle dispute at work, conflict resolution, collective bargaining, address the issue of occupational health. It's a specialized field, so we can make do with that. But what I just want to add is that I think it's also important in this our discourse, and I've seen the background tape, that just yesterday, the joint committee of health workers, they've done to us. So that has also increased the noise level of industrial unrest. And I also know, I was trying to check the data by the Ministry of Labor. Almost about 450 industrial disputes have been recorded between 2015 and 2022. So I think it's also good that as we're discussing, we should back it up with data so that we are clear. Again, we need comparative analysis. What was it before 2015 and what is it now? But the one that is also of interest to me is that as significant as disputes are taking place, we should also not forget that there have been a lot of disputes that have been amicably resolved by the Federal Ministry of Labor. So 421 or 450 disputes in a country as big as Nigeria, close almost about 60 million formal and informal sectors, organized federal unionism. I don't think this is enough to raise hysteria. Conflicts are inevitable in the world of work. You can't run away from that. But what is important is how do you apprehend them? And I want to say here that the Ministry of Labor, regardless of what we want to say, these two ministers, they have apprehended a good number of disputes. The crisis of minimum wage. We got it done without a single national strike. Then implementation, consequential adjustment, that tells you. You also know judiciary workers were on strike. Parliamentary workers union, they were also on strike several times. So what is significant is that when disputes take place, are we making effort to resolve the dispute? There have also been a lot of landmark judgments by the National Industrial Court on adjudication. So I just want to put that in context. But back to your pointed question, Kingston. What is it?
Why do you want to take the question?
Yeah.
I'd like you to clarify the point you made, that there is no need for hysteria, because it's a number of positives have also been recorded. But if by the data you indicated a moment ago, 450 industrial disputes over a 7-year period.
Absolutely.
Yes, you've looked at the absolute numbers, 450 industrial disputes. I don't know whether there's also a breakdown of one, the number of man hours lost as a result of the 450. I don't know whether also there is a breakdown of lost production as a result of those work stoppages, and therefore the total cost to the economy. And so whether there should be hysteria or not.
That's why I said that we need the data to do proper analysis. But Kingsley, you also know that globally now, industrial disputes are the norm. In fact, in the case of France, it moves from industrial dispute strikes to become more or less insurgents, over the pension, in which they try to reduce the number of years.
Increase.
Increase the number of years.
2 years.
And workers have been on strike. They went on the streets. I think there is global crisis going on. What I'm just saying is that we need those data so that we can have an informed discussion. But the one that is of interest to me is that we should also play up where disputes have taken place and they have been amicably resolved. And I hope when we look at that, we can address the current strike going on, so that we know what we can learn from what has happened before. But back to the drivers of this dispute, and that's what we don't report. You know, strikes are formalized, dramatized, visible form of worker protest. There are other hidden forms of protest. You know, absenteeism, sabotage on the part of workers who are not well taken care of. So what's the driver? The driver is simple, Kisley. We can't get it right until we address what I call crisis of compensation. Working people are not well paid at all. They could be well paid. I could hear Jumai, I think you asked that pointedly. Why is it that the civil servants are not well taken care of? And they're supposed to be engine. And that's why I want to commend the head of service for this gesture, which ministry has also approved, about 40% increase in some peculiar allowances. It's a gesture, but we are not yet there. Now, I've said so, we have working poor. People are working, yet they are not better off. So we must address that. That's the fundamental. And it's not just, you know, we always talk of ease of doing business. People don't talk of ease of working, ease of living. You know, you have all sorts of measures that have been taken so that capital can move freely, but nobody talks of how worker goes to work. What do you pay him? I don't know, you have to remind me of this marathon cook.
Hilda. 100 hours.
You know, but I also know that we have marathon broadcasters like you who report every day, 8 to 8. What do they pay?
8 to 8. It's not 8 to 8, 8 to 1 a.m.
And for Hilda, it's just a flash. For you, it's what you have been doing for decades. Yeah. So we must have a way to value labor. Labor creates wealth. And you cannot create that wealth until you nurture it, you motivate it, you educate it very well in a way that they can really add value. Once you address this crisis of compensation, and pointedly, I've said so, the task before the new administration, quickly, is to address the crisis of compensation of the working people. Very well. We have to move from this minimum wage to real living wage. That is very rewarding.
Is it living wage? Sorry, we're trying to see if our other Zoom is ready.
Yes.
But, all right, so we'll get to the other Zoom presently. Just keep him on hold. I'd like Comrade Issa Remo to drill further into the issues that he's thrown up, very significant issues. It's made a comparison, for instance, between our focus on ease of doing business. But as he rightly also pointed out, nobody talks, nobody plays up also ease of working. Nobody also plays up ease of living.
Absolutely.
So it's not just living wage alone that will provide ease of working or ease of living. So there are a number of factors that are attendant to that phrase, medical, ease of living.
Yes, housing, medical, you know, be able to
transportation,
pay school fees, subsidize school fees for your children, you know, transportation. Those are the issues. I mean, Hilda is going
when you pay out of your pocket.
Yes.
For medical costs, you have a hole suddenly in your pocket.
A huge hole, actually. A huge hole.
And most of the health challenges also arise from work, occupational health, because of stress, workload. Now, who pays for that?
You
know. So, it's the working people. So we have to have a serious conversation to drive ourselves from this what I call wage poverty, you know, to what is really can deliver productivity on the part of the workers and make him or her to live comfortably. And that requires a lot of tasks. Let me quickly wrap up on this. I mean, health workers, they are on the street. I mean, because they are organized, they are visible. As academic union, they will have their own. But you also know of working men and women who are in uniform. Police, they are working people in uniform. You know, I had the privilege of serving on the Wages and Salary Commission when we did this survey of what an average police constable had. You need to say we thank God that we are secure. Although President Buhari along the line quietly approved something that is not dramatized for them to uplift it. So we must, that's why I'm saying this our discussion is taking place on the eve of a transition. The first major task is that there should be engagement with organized labor, employers of labor, government officials, for us to get out of this wage poverty. And that requires social dialogue. In fact, my view is that we can have a 10-year pact. You can phase out the percentage of wage increase. You get the point I'm reading? We can start 20%, 30%, 40%. That will, we get the data that will restore us, to take care of rate of inflation, devaluation of currency, cost of living, in return for industrial peace. Are you hearing me? So in return for
I can hear you.
productivity,
We're not, Comrade Isaremo, you are not the only guest this morning. I know that we can engage you for the next 3 hours the same way we can engage the others. But I think one of the major takeaways, and we'll invite the other guests, because Peter Esele also brought in a perspective that, namely, on a comparative basis, why is it that there is less industrial disharmony in the organized private sector than you would find in the public service?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it may very well be that their tactics of industrial relations work for them. But there are broader issues that you have also raised, and in terms of headlines or in terms of captions, for what actually part of the caption we are having this morning ought to be after May 29th. That's the series that we've been doing. After May 29th, resolving perennial industrial action. Could very well be addressing Nigeria's wage poverty.
Absolutely.
Or alternatively, focusing on ease of living.
Working.
Ease of living, ease of working. So, Comrade Saremo will pause in the meantime.
Yes, we have to bring in now. We hear that the Zoom link is ready for Adewale Smart Oyunrinde. He's joining us via Zoom from Lagos. You've been listening to the conversation, actually, and I'm sure you've heard the issues raised by both Mr. Esele and Comrade Issa Aremu on ways to negotiate and go around this industrial action. We all know that under the law and indeed globally, the right of employees to embark on industrial strike is considered a universal democratic right of all employees. Back here in Nigeria, at times when unions go on strike, the public hits hard. Let's have your take.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Mr. Esele. Quite a long time, and comrade DG. Good morning, also, and also the presenters. Thank you for having us. I think a lot has been said, and taking it from the analysis of Mr. Esele about the percentage of industrial actions in the public and the private sector.
Well, we seem to have lost him there, but I'm sure when he returns, we'll be able to respond to the question. Let's bring in, I believe that Comrade Peter Esele will respond to that question. Well, we have to come back to the studio. You know how technology works. It will get better, I believe. Comrade Issa Aremu, let's have your take on that. It's a right to go on strike. And when unions go on strike, they expect the public to support them at times. And government as well. But
well, I think Peter summed it up, and I could hear the DG of NECA trying to build on it.
Yeah.
That, and maybe that's also what we need to showcase.
Support.
What has made the private sector to be relatively stable compared to the public sector. It's not that there are no disputes in the private sector. In fact, possibly they generate more disputes, because the nature of the world of business is that employers of labor, they want to make profit, and they would like to cut corner at the expense of the workers. But the beauty of private sector is that you have the collective bargaining machinery in place, which have been put in place. So they negotiate periodically. You sign an agreement for 2-3 years. You have provision for reopener clause. If things change, you can return back. And if there are disputes, you go through arbitration, mediation, IAP. And so maybe we need that model to also apply in the public sector. You know, what I've discovered in the public sector is that with respect to wages, we all wait for periodic 5-year cycle of minimum wage improvement, which is completely wrong, because minimum wage is for actually the lowest of people.
Oh, yes.
You know, when actually in the public sector they negotiate every
We
year.
should be talking about maximum.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But that now raises the point that Peter raised, that we need to build capacity for also government officials, the unions who are in the public sector, for them to take advantage of collective bargaining machinery to resolve a lot of industrial disputes we have in our hand. And we can see that the solution is not walking away. The solution is not.
But do we need to renegotiate and keep negotiating the minimum wage, or is it the maximum wage? I think it should be a process. It should be a seamless process. Like after 5 years, you don't need to sit on the table again and renegotiate.
Absolutely.
Yes. Why is that not done? It should be seamless.
No, that's what I'm saying. That those are the kind of new challenges that we need to put in place now. You know, as we're having new administration, not just at the federal level, even state levels. You know, we have to make sure that we put CB, what I call collective bargaining machineries, in place in the public sector, in a way that there will be seamless negotiation to discuss issues dealing with welfare and benefit of the workers in the public sector. I mean, look at the 40% which has been announced for some of you who are in the public service. You know, so people will say, why 40? Why not 50? Why not 60?
Why not 100%?
Why not 100%? Because, well, but it's not negotiated. It ought to have been negotiated so that you have an idea. And it could even be 20%, depending on what you could get out of it.
You know,
so,
comrade, I want to take you back. And of course, some of our viewers, I want to also take them back. I'm fascinated by the phrase ease of living and wage poverty that we have in Nigeria. And I'm saying this because for those who lived in this economy, worked in this economy, say in the 70s after the Udoji Awards, right up to the 80s, before the advent of SAP, if you had money in your pocket, there was certainty as to what you could purchase with that money. I'm sure people will remember this very clearly. We had coins that were in use.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We had coins that were in use. And if you were traveling by luxury bus from, say, Lagos to Onitsha, it was 5 naira. And if you were to go by 504 saloon car from Onitsha to Nsukka, it was 2 naira. But if you decided to join a Nissan or van, that is, I think it's a 14-seater or 16-seater, I can't remember. It was 1 naira 50 kobo. And that 50 kobo made a difference. It made a difference. So if you were a level 5 officer, you knew that you didn't have wage poverty, as it were. So, all right, so we can look at distortions in the macroeconomic space, but more fundamentally, Comrade Aremu, when did it occur, and have we tried to walk back, that employers have now become king, as it were? You take workers, for granted and take it or leave it. So this is what I have to offer you. You either take it or you leave it. How did we miss it? So that nobody cares and everybody just says, look, this is what I can manage. You manage it, and then the poverty, of course, becomes self-replicating.
Well, it is clear that, I mean, you've come a long way like me too, so it means you can speak on ease of movement. Different bosses you are talking of in the 70s, 80s.
Exactly.
So which means we have done it before. You know, the first minimum wage, I always give the example, just 125 naira. You know, but that was about $250 because the currency was very strong. Now, in nominal terms, for you to earn 30,000, that would have been a lot of money in the 80s and co. But you know, today, it's less than $40 or $50 per month. And what can now deliver for a family of 4 with his wife and children? So if we play it up, the point I was trying to raise is that you even expect more dispute than we have already recorded. Am I communicating? When you really know and also the impunity of some employers who would have no respect for agreement, who will say take it or leave it. And I'm very sure the Employers Association will speak more on that. But the one I just want to quickly wrap up is that the only way out is that we must return to social dialogue, tripartism, and all the parties have to appreciate that. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Whether it's the power of employer, whether it's the power of government, whether it's the power of the unions. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Nigeria is a member of International Labour Organization right from 1960, where we got independence. ILO, we've signed some of the core conventions dealing with collective bargaining. We have been brought up, we have now agreed that the way to manage dispute in the world of work is tripartism. That means you have a sense of compromise, negotiate. No easy answer. So no employer can dictate to the union. So also unions cannot dictate. Government cannot dictate. I mean, when we were in school in those days, we used to talk of dictatorship of the proletariat. I mean, you can see it in some of the attitude of some of the unions. But it's okay if you want to do revolution, it's a different thing. But unions are not meant for revolution. It's to pursue the welfare of your member within the ambit of the law. The same thing some employers who have this unitary dictatorial attitude, that cannot fly. The only way out is that let's negotiate. And it's only what you negotiate that is sustainable. Because if you dictate, you blackmail employers, they will do sweet-tight agreement. Now.
That's right.
Memorandum of understanding, that's the thing that ASU was presenting up, but that's not a collective agreement. Or you get agreement not from the structures that are there. Ministry of Labour, Wages Commission, you got it from, now, Lulu's Bricks. I don't want
from
to.
another boardroom.
I don't want to. Or you even go to the presidency and say, President has agreed. There are structures to carry it out. So return back to social dialogue. And luckily, Nigeria has all the institutions to drive that. We have the National Advisory Labour Council, which is made up of NECA, the 2 labour centers, state governors, and it has been well constituted by this present administration. So we must take advantage. We can really resolve it. The last point I want to raise, Kingsley, is that we can't drive development at all with this kind of conflictual industrial model. Are you hearing me? Or put the other way around. The only way Nigeria will get out of underdevelopment is to have a structure that will make industrial relations to be harmonious. It has to be driven by give and take spirit. But when we were just discussing how many patients will die now. With this strike has taken place, for a country that, in fact, mortality has been miserably high. Not only that, life expectancy is low, and then they will now go to quacks, private hospital, out of pocket that the money is not there. That cannot be. That's why I say that the quick thing the new administration has to do, we must work out a partnership for industrial harmony in return for productivity and stability in the world of work.
All right, Comrade Disaremo, thank you. Now, the 2 Zoom connections we have are back. You saw them a while ago on the screen. Adewale Smart Soyerinde, who is the DG of NECA,
he has frozen, I think.
Employers Consultative Association, and Comrade Peter Esele. I'm not sure which of them.
Peter Esele is ready right now.
All right, Comrade Peter Esele. I hope, sorry, we lost you a while. I hope you were able to listen in on some of the issues that we've raised with Comrade Disaremo, in addition, of course, to the points that you had earlier made about relative industrial harmony in the private sector on account of the mechanisms that they normally kick in. But Comrade Aremo headlined a more fundamental point, that namely, a focus on ease of living, ease of working, and then the reduction of wage poverty. What are your thoughts on this?
I would like to talk from experience. That's bringing into the practical aspect of it, on about ease of work. Now, I'm going to see these are events that actually happened. A worker has his word in school. And the child was playing in the school and sustained a very serious injury. in school. Now, the parent called the company. The company sent the ambulance to the school to evacuate the child of the worker. And then the ambulance evacuated the child of the worker, took him to the closest clinic, and they carried out an evaluation of the child's medical condition. And then after that review, they decided that the child needed further care. So they had to move the child to a bigger hospital where they had to carry out an X-ray and they had to get the best of doctors to attend to that child. Now, then that is one. Then let's look at the second worker. The second worker had a child that has that has similar injury, but nobody cares. Now the worker had to run from the office to go pick his child, and then the worker was wailing. He could not even fund the medical care of the child. Now the first story is one who worked in the private sector. That work in the private sector has a collective bargaining agreement that is in place that guarantees such care. So what do you have? The worker B works in the public sector. Worker A works in the private sector. Now, how do you expect both workers to have same productivity? It's not possible. Now, the worker A spoke to me and told me directly that why will he not die for this company? They had to get the best of doctors to make sure that the child is okay. To tell you the seriousness of this injury, the child was on crutches for 6 months. Now, the second worker, nobody cares. So when you talk about ease of working, worker A has the ease of working because one, it belongs to an organized union. Two, the employer and the employee has a bargaining agreement, which is the collective agreement put together that determine their relationship. Three, the employer has respect for the agreement that has been signed. Four, the employer is bound to enforce, implement, and execute that agreement. Now, let me bring it to the public space. As president of Pengassin, I never knew how you don't keep to agreement. But when I became president of TUC was when I now saw that even agreement doesn't matter. And who was I dealing with majorly? Public sector, the government. The government don't respect agreement, yet you want workers' productivity to be enhanced? No. The collective bargaining of the workers in the public sector, what collective bargaining do they have? That's another aspect you also need to look at. And then three, you also need to look at the policy of government. Let me just give an example again. In France, the French president decided to increase pension from 60 to 62 years, and they are protesting. And the president said in 10 years, they will have problem with payment of pension. So he's trying to avoid that. Then let me bring it to Nigeria. The president of Nigeria woke up and decided to move the pensionable age for teachers from 60 to 65. Now, what has he done? Where did you do the critical analysis and the financial input to say in 10 years, are we going to have crisis of pension payment? The answer is yes. That's one. Then number two, are you having debt of teachers that is making it impossible for you that is making you want to ensure that teachers remain in the system? Did you do that data analysis? Did you do the evaluation? Did you do the cost analysis of what it will cost you in 10 years? Or you are going to again in 10 years time borrow to pay pension? So this is also certain things that is lacking in the public sector. They don't have that critical analysis to look at what will happen in 10 years. Issa was making reference to having a plan for 10 years. But first, you must have an annual budget. Your budget must be able to tell you in 3 years, what is the number of workers do we need? In the civil service, I will tell you, or in the public service, I will tell you a lot of illegal employment is conducted regularly. So what you have, the workforce is over-bloated. And then that in itself is also a challenge coming up in future. And then what you have done by wanting to play to the emotions of the populace, you've also created a problem for the future. So if you want to resolve industrial crisis, you must be ready to have a long-term view that is process-driven, data-driven, that has critical analysis behind it. And the financial aspect too. That way you will know that from day one, you don't want industrial crisis. Thank you.
Juma, I'm sorry, I know you have a question to ask.
No, you go
I
ahead.
was fascinated by the example that Comrade Peter Esele gave about the worker who has ease of working and also, to an extent, ease of living. The child gets injured in school, and then the company's ambulance comes, takes the child, and then facility goes on, unlike the other parent. But let me. I don't talk about myself usually, but let me relate this experience. When we were in primary school, this was over 50 years ago, we were playing football one day, and one of our classmates, Faluyi, I was the goalkeeper on that occasion. I used to be a goalkeeper, and I'm sure if I was a goalkeeper for Real Madrid yesterday, it might have been a different story. That would have been the talisman they needed. But so Faluyi and I, we made a contact along with one of the defenders, and Faluyi fell. Faluyi fell on a rusty tin of pig milk. Wow. Right on his back. It was during school hours. Right on his back. Pierced it. And you know what? I mean, at that time, now you know about tetanus and so on and so forth. And he was bleeding. So, of course, that was the end of the match. What happened? It was clear to us that we needed, at that time, to take him to the Children's Hospital, opposite Central Hospital in Benin. There was a children's wing, if you're on Sapler Road by the left. So we took him, we went there. So all the information that they required was, look, what is the name of this people? Tell us your school, the school that you are attending, the name of your head teacher, we'll call headmaster at that time. We gave all the names. And they took him in, treated him, gave him his injection, and of course with a card, for him to return from time to time. I'm telling you what I'm saying now, free of charge.
Yes.
So,
without police report.
Can that happen today? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
I mean, I remember that incident clearly because, as I said, I was a goalkeeper. So I won't tell you the nickname I had when I was a goalkeeper.
And you'll find out. no, because the link with SLA is very good. Yes. Let's continue with him. Yes. You had what... Okay, let's bring in, we heard that Adewale Smart is here. You'll be listening to the conversation, and Kingsley, as a goalkeeper, has been telling us, situations then and comparison to what is happening now, and Mr. Esede has given us another example that where the private sector can take care of their employees, the public sector, it's lacking behind. Do you think that is the cause for the frustration that the unions have in the public sector, that this insistent strike actions continues to occur?
I want to agree with substantially with part of the conversation that you've had. Quite interesting conversation, really, and it's good to know that the employers are not demonized in totality. Now, for us in the private sector, and also making a comment about the public sector, I think the fundamental difference is the level of accountability.
Correct. Yeah.
The level of accountability in the private sector is higher compared to the public sector. A private sector organization probably will have, within the context of funding its business, expanding business, will probably have approached a bank or gotten a credit facility from a bank to promote or to expand its business. Now, when you down to, you lose on both sides. Your interest will keep running, and then the production level will also suffer. Now, it becomes imperative for you to make sure to do all that is necessary within the context of your power and your limitation to make sure that production continues by keeping the employees happy, and also by keeping your shareholders happy. So your level of accountability to both of them and to the context of your survival becomes very high. Secondly, the level of education at the private sector level, the level of education within the context of our roles, the role of the employer and the employee, the understanding of the process of industrial relations, when conflict arises. It is normal, it is acceptable. Even one of the foundation of industrial relations is that conflict must happen.
Yes.
And because we all agree that it must happen, we've all also together, we've created structures and frameworks that will help us to resolve those crises. Now, if the person at the helm of affairs in either the public or the private sector doesn't understand that process very well, it will muddle it up in the context of agreeing what is not sustainable, dancing to the gallery, making comments that tends to malign other partners within the context of that negotiation framework. And once you do that, you are breaching trust. You are creating a very dangerous precedent that if it doesn't hurt you now, it will come back to hurt you in the future. And to Comrade Isa's comment about the issue of ease of living and ease of working, I think we should not take this ease of living and ease of working out of the whole context of ease of doing business. Because the industrial relations system itself, it thrives under an ecosystem, under the presumption that the macroeconomic system is working and is working well. So when there is disruption in the macroeconomic system and businesses are stifled, businesses cannot survive in that environment, it creates a dynamics that makes the employer to be under serious stress. And once the employer is vulnerable, is highly vulnerable, then it becomes difficult for him even to meet some basic responsibilities that he has committed to. We should not lose sight of that. Now, currently, if you permit me, two weeks ago, the federal government came up with new taxes, new frameworks for taxes. This is in addition to over 60 different types of taxes, levies, and fees that organized businesses are paying in this environment. So when you make that environment very difficult for businesses to survive, then you are changing the dynamics of the engagement within that industrial relations framework. But kudos to employers, I must confess, not because I lead the employer secretariat, but because the resilience that they have demonstrated in keeping to agreements, in building their capacity to engage, and also committing to workers' welfare. I think we must commend the employers in this environment. So we should not take the context of ease of living and ease of work. We cannot take it out of the context of ease of doing business. And ease of doing business itself rests on the kind of policy. Comrade Esele has mentioned government policy. Comrade Sarema has mentioned government policy. When policies are not stable, when we have policy over somersault every now and then, it becomes difficult for even industrial relations system to thrive in that environment. Last year, there was a framework that was agreed by government, a fiscal policy measure framework that was supposed to last 2022 to 2024. And in the middle of just early 2023, the government came up with a fiat without consulting, without adequate consultation, and they jettisoned that framework that was agreed in 2022 to 2024 and came up with another framework, increasing excise between 20% to 100%. Those kind of distortions create problems in the industrial relations framework that we currently have. Lastly, for me, for my first intervention, is the need for education. I think the public sector needs to do more within the context of educating those that are to manage the industrial relations process in the private sector. I think at the public sector, NECA conducts training on a regular basis for employers, for HR managers. In fact, now we are collaborating with the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management so that they also take the context of their engagement out of HR. As Comrade Esele said, human resources is different from industrial relations. So if if human resource manager and you go to the negotiation table without taking cognizance of the key principles that drives industrial relations, you will go to the table and start speaking grammar. And you probably just create more problem for yourself. So we are deepening the engagement within the context of industrial relations, championing the education of all partners so that progressively we all can have better testimonies in this country concerning the state of our industrial relations. Industrial relations is beautiful, is one of the best practices because it involves this tripartite. And no system thrives better than a system that has the tripartite driving it.
Okay, indeed, Adewale Smart, you like Comrade Aremu, you've raised a lot of pertinent questions that I believe will come back to you after this break. Do stay.
Nigeria is a country of young entrepreneurs and great talent with the potential of making global impact. From the north to the south, there are high-skilled talents who have created businesses that are making waves globally.
Electric vehicles are not just the future, they are the now, and they are the now for Nigeria too.
Jelani Aliu, presently driving the innovation of the electric cars in the country. Victor Osimhen is a foremost Nigerian footballer and a striker with the Napoli Football Club of Italy. He is currently among the top 3 world-rated strikers in the European League.
And Osimhen sweeps it home.
Toby Amusha is a Nigerian sprinter.
The African champion, the Commonwealth champion, became the world champion, but the world record holder as well. 12.40 in the semis.
Nigeria is a country full of potential, and its young people are the driving force behind its growth and development. Believe in yourself and believe in Nigeria.
Nigeria, better together.
This message is powered by the Presidential Transition Council, PTC.
Since I joined this program don't help me. They carry the money, give me. I take join with the money, carry go market. As you see now, my market now come be fine past before. These are asusu that we make. The money now come big fast. I take buy this thing, I feed buy what I am now, buy carry plantain. Before now only gari where I they sell. But now I don't buy what I am at. Buy potatoes, cocoyam, and thank federal government. Then may God bless you now. Up, the child don't come.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are going to have to introduce another guest to us, to join us for today's conversation. Of course, it's been on Good Morning Nigeria a couple of times, right there in our studios in Benin. Professor Richard Idubo is a former Dean, Faculty of Law at the University of Benin, and also a former employee in the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment. Professor Richard Idubo, we're glad to have you join us. Still piece of the conversation, but of course, this will be an ongoing conversation. I wouldn't know how much of it you apprehended while we're trying to set up the studios for you to be part of today's conversation. Just tackling the industrial disharmony in the country, and the figures given to us by Comrade Aremu this morning indicated that between 2015 and 2022, that's a 7-year period, the country witnessed 450 strike actions. Just absolute numbers. We're not talking about number of man-hours lost. We're not also talking about lost productivity as well as the damage to the economy. In your opinion, where are we getting it wrong, and how can we climb out of this?
It is nice to be back here. Quite honestly, what problem we have is the effect of a serious cause. Now, I'm going to look at it from the point of view of one that has been there. Are we still doing what we ought to do? If we have been taking preventive measure, is preventive measure aimed at, ameliorating the problems posed by industrial action actually in place? Has it been successful? That is the reason some of us are asking that we should put in place preemptive measure. Preemptive. You nip issues in the bud before they ever rear their ugly heads. At the shop floor level, ATC. Luckily, we have Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment. But Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, as far as I know this very moment, is not doing what it undertook to do many years before now. We have the officers of Federal Ministry of Labor who ought to go into the field to monitor, visit and inspect establishments wherever any authorized labor officer has reasonable cause to believe that any worker is employed therein or thereon. The purpose of this inspection is to identify the extent to which employers of labor are rules compliant. Are they complying with the rules? We have rules, emanating from Employee Compensation Act, for instance. In this country, that is a very potent instrument that would have guaranteed peace to the workforce. You are going to work, if you are injured and you don't pray to be injured. Your family will not be abandoned if you kick the bucket. If you don't and you sustain any debilitating injury, you won't be abandoned. But how many people are giving in to this? Various state governments are very heavy employers of labor. But you ought to know, my interviewer, that state governments have not done anything good on this score. They are still thinking of domesticating Employee Compensation Act, for instance. That is one I'm bringing out. What is the basis for domesticating? It is a federal law, and labor is in the exclusive legislative list. And if we extend it beyond there, the authority for this is Section 4, subsection 3 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which is to the effect that all matters appertaining labor is the exclusive preserve of the National Assembly, for the National Assembly to make laws. When therefore laws have been made, such as this employees' compensation that I talked about, and many other regulatory statutes on this score, it serves no useful purpose for any state government to say we want to domesticate this law. It is imperative on the state governments to give effect to all of these things. Are they making contribution? Since for 11 years now that statute came into being, as any employer, what effort as employers of labor in the states put in place to ensure that the necessary deduction is made and paid into the coffers? The Employee Compensation Act came in to guarantee what we call a social security scheme, so that when anybody is failed, when any worker is killed in the course of duty, he doesn't need to go back to the employer again. That scheme will pay. But nobody is addressing that. State governments are guilty of this waywardness. I'm afraid I have to say it. Then if you go to the private sector, are they making this contribution? If they are not making this contribution and the leaders of the workforce acquiesce in the waywardness of these various employers, then you can only expect a avoidable chaotic industrial relations situation in the country. The rules are there. Luckily, we are talking about the laws as they are this very moment. But I am aware, since I took part in making the new laws that are to come into force, in some time to come. In 2020, NSC and TUC, we were at one. I featured in that very program at Uyo, during which time we had to tidy up things from the odd end. 3 years later, that law is not sent to, the bill is not perfected. It has not metamorphosed into a law. And therefore, we are talking about the law as it is this very moment, and the law, and not the law as it ought to be, which has enough, for the workforce, and we enhance the well-being of the workforce. I am canvassing that we go to the roots and embark on integrated labor inspection, so that before matters arise, that will blossom into trade dispute, which may in turn result in strike action, they would have been nipped in the bud. Is Federal Ministry of Employment and Labor and Employment doing any such thing? What effort has federal government made to empower officers in this very ministry? It is not for the ministry to start taking part in negotiation where it ought to play the role of a mediator. It is essentially the responsibility of that ministry to mediate and not to cause conciliation to be put in place and not to negotiate. The primary objective of the ministry appears to me to have been lost if we are not encouraging inspection visits to establishment where we can identify problems. And when problems do arise, you nip it in the bud, advise employers of labor, go back and write to the various employers of labor to take remedial action. That way, we will be doing ourselves a great service by ensuring that problems that would have arisen, problems that would have led to industrial action that are nipped in the bud. I am talking about integrated labor inspection, not just one labor inspector going to inspect and another person from the compliance division will go and also inspect the same establishment. Then you have what they will call them now, the officers of internal affairs, also going there to inspect and seek to have work permit. And then you have many others. Employers of labor will be intimidated and they are soon to withdraw cooperation. So it must be integrated, where one person will be trained in such a way, person in Federal Ministry of Labor that is, to ensure that when they visit, they will be in a position to appreciate and advise, give technical advice to various employers of labor with a view to making compliance, convenient. And we are in this country, and the country is for us. When the sky falls, it's for everybody. That is as far as private sector and the government are concerned. But we are talking about federal. Federal is not well in this regard. And if we must go further to improve, especially because of a new administration that is coming in, we must disentangle ourselves from those areas that did not augur well, did not mean well for the workforce of this country. Is federal government showing any good example? Many workers did not get the minimum wage in the consequential increase. After 3 years. I am not enhancing my own position, but I know enough to know that very many people did not get. And we promulgate a law. A law is in place where federal government will honor it in the breach rather than in its observance. All we can imagine is what will happen to the private sector. And we are talking about the private sector now. We have the organized private sector, and then we have the informal private sector. And the informal private sector has a role to play. If we ignore that the informal private sector has a role to play, and then we'll be creating problems, crisis, avoidable crisis. So I am thinking that to go on well, all the rules appertaining industrial relations ought to have been put in place quite effectively. But some intellectuals may not accept what I'm saying now, especially when they are in the pay of the oligopolist. They will think deregulation of the labor market is the way forward. Yes, there is an aspect of deregulation that is healthy. But if you leave deregulation to translate into, do it by honest means if you like, but by any method, you can exploit the workers, then the country cannot breathe the breath of freedom. The workforce in the country cannot breathe the breath of freedom. They will continue to languish in the most objectionable, abject poverty. And I don't think that is healthy enough for a country that is in a hurry to pick up industrially, that is in a hurry to enhance the economic base. So we must look inward. A number of these statutes are there. We can enhance it. We can lubricate. I'm calling on federal ministry because that is a key ministry which government ought to respect, which government ought to fund very well. Train all of these officers so that they go into the field and, reduce the pain and promote the pleasure of the workforce. So I think that may be...
Richard Edubo, thank you very much for your intervention. Of course, as I indicated, you came in late into the conversation, but the points you made are valid, and this is a conversation we're going to have another day. But I just want to get the comments very briefly of both Comrade Peter Esele and Adewale Smart Oyerinde. There's something that I've also observed, particularly in our country. Now, it seemed very pronounced during military regimes where decrees could be made overnight or promulgated overnight or an edict passed overnight in a state, and then you are bound by it, and everyone says, this is the law, this is the law. I know you gentlemen, you've talked about the need for tripartite arrangement in the social dialogue that we need to have to maintain industrial harmony in the country. Professor Edubo has referenced us to several statutes and why some of those statutes are being held in breach and so on and so forth. Are we passing the laws because some persons have the opportunity to have bigger voices or a larger presence, and then they get the laws passed? You can rewrite a piece of legislation through the National Assembly, but its implementation becomes a challenge. And then everybody says, look, we have a law, why are you not obeying the law? We have a negotiation, we have an agreement, why are you not respecting it? What is missing in this so that there isn't this frequent reference to, so this thing is there, you are not respecting it? It looks like sometimes when negotiations do take place, particularly in the public sector, a gun is held to the head of government, and then the government, of course, gets blackmailed by the public to say, look, resolve this thing, resolve this thing. So they acquiesce to virtually any and everything, and before you know it, you have only just a Pyrrhic victory. Comrade Peter Esele, very quickly, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much. For a government to have made a law and not obeying the law, it shows that the government itself did not have a plan. Because the process of making a law, it goes through several processes before it gets to the National Assembly, and then you tinker with it again before it goes back to the executive, before finally it becomes a law signed by the president. So if the president signed that law, it means that the president knows what he's signing. So if at the end of the day, the president will not say they could not implement the law, that is dereliction of duty, an abdication of his responsibility. So once it's a law, you are bound to obey the law. On the other aspect is that the federal government, if I'm to score between federal and state government, I think I would score federal government 50%. They would have done better. State government, most of them is at 20% level. They have absolute no respect for the laws. They have no respect for the workers. So if we must move forward, education is key. One of my recommendations would be, what is wrong in having labor officers in every ministry? The labor officers will collate data, will first of all arrest whatever problem that ministry is going through, and then will now feed the ministers, because the ministers are politicians. So the labor officer or the labor attaché in each of these ministries will be the one to interact and arrest issues and then feed DG, the various politicians in the system, so that they will already have an idea of what is coming and will be ready to arrest it. As president of TUC, I don't know everything about my members. No, but we have officers who are responsible, who will now report to me. Based on that, I will now make an informed decision. So that will also help the president and also help the ministers. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Esale, thank you. There, as we're beginning to round up the program, let's go to Adewale Smart Oyeride to get your closing remark on this topic and how, as negotiation is key, how education can help our union leaders to be able to negotiate a better outcome for workers. Briefly, please.
Thank you. I think I will come back to my earlier key comment on accountability. As he said, it is irresponsible for us to agree, and then, or you are agreeing with the view that you will not implement, or you are agreeing just to buy time. It's quite unfortunate, and we need to come back to the issue of data. Data research should drive our processes. When you mentioned the issue of the France president, that they've done some level of calculation and realize if we take this course of action, these are the consequences for 2, 3, 4 years along down the line, then we should not take it. But for us here, it's like the politicians just take a decision knowing that they will not be around to face the consequences of non-implementation, and they throw the whole country into crisis. We must start holding ourselves accountable. It will surprise you that even the minimum wage, the national minimum wage of 30,000, that most states are not paying. During the negotiation about 4 years ago, we have the representatives of the governors forum, 6 governors that were part of that negotiation. And some governors were even touting 50,000, 60,000 as minimum wage. Now, it now came up to 30,000, and they are still struggling to pay. So you can see the quagmire or the deliberate attempt to sabotage a lot of things. And it's part of the contradictions that we need to face, and we need to face it squarely.
All right. Thank you very much, Adewale Smart Oyorinde, for your views. Let's come back to the studios. Comrade Saremo, let's get your closing thoughts very briefly.
Well, I think I also agree with my co-panelists, that this conversation in progress. And I'm happy that Smart Adewale Smart, my co-DG, although from the employers, also agree now that the ease of doing business, is an ecosystem that includes ease of work, But often we don't always talk of ease of work. In talk of ease of doing business, nobody talks of labor. Talks of permits, licenses, tax reduction for business people. But I'm happy that's conversation. And he has used one term recently, which I agree with him. He said that NECA is promoting responsible enterprise, which means take care of your members and co. I think we also need that at the government sector level. And honestly, at the risk of being misunderstood, federal, we have responsible governance when it comes to labor issues, regardless of what we want to agree. I mean, COVID-19, recession 1 and 2, this government has not retrenched. Okay. And the rest. So what we need to do is that one good turn deserves another one. So if you talk of responsible governance, responsible business, there should also be constructive unionism. And let me end up on this note. There is a judgment which was passed on Tuesday by the president of National Industrial Court, Justice B. Kanyib, PhD, OFR, and which has now re-emphasized that the monopoly of unions in this sector is over now, which means you have to liberalize. So what I'm trying to say here is that if we don't rely on negotiations, social dialogue,
there will be crisis in future.
That will be crisis.
Okay, we would like
to. On that note, Comrade Isaramu, he's the DG CEO, Michael Imodu, National Labour Institute. Thank you so much for coming. We've run out of time, actually. It's 1 minute.
And we should just also let our viewers know that today is the 2nd anniversary of his appointment as DG of the Michael Imodu Labour Institute. So congratulations. And thank you for always being with us, either in Lagos or via Zoom.
Let me appreciate the president for appointing me.
Exactly. I also thank from our Benin studio, former Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Benin, Professor Richard Idobo. It's a pleasure to have you join us, though you came in late due to some technical. Okay. Also joined us for a Zoom from Lagos is the former President TUC, Comrade Peter Esele. Thank you so much for your input. And via Zoom also from Lagos is the Director General Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA, Adewale Smart Oyinde. Thanks so much for being part of the show. I am Jumbo Yusuf.
All right, so that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Tomorrow is another day, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osabalo.
This is the network service of the NTA. episode of the Nigerian Navy Today. I am Jibrin Baba Ndache. Hydrographic survey and dredging of sea routes are very important nautical activities that helps in safe navigation of ships and vessels. On Thursday, 11th May 2023, history was made in Imo State when Vice President Professor Yemi Osibanjo flagged off an economic transformation project, the hydrographic survey, dredging of sea routes from Oguta Lake to the Atlantic Ocean. The Nigerian Navy Today will bring you highlights from this epoch-making event. This and other regular segments of the program will make your viewing delight. Please stay with us.
On Monday, 15th May 2023, the Managing Director of Country Chair of Shell Petroleum Development Corporation, Mr. Osagi Okunbo, and his team were at the Naval Headquarters on a courtesy visit to the Chief of the Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Awa Zubairu Gambo. The visit, amongst other things, will strengthen and explore the expertise and experience of both the Nigerian Navy and Shell Petroleum Corporation for a mutually beneficial relationship. Earlier, the Chief of the Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Awa Zubairu Gambo, CFR, was in attendance at the 10th National Assembly Induction and Orientation held in Abuja on Wednesday, 10th May 2023. The induction and orientation program aims to equip the lawmakers with the necessary knowledge and skills to effectively carry out their duties and fulfill their obligations to their constituents and the nation as a whole. It also promotes understanding among the members, encourages cooperation, and fosters a sense of unity in working towards the common goal of good governance.
I, Vice Admiral Awal Zubair Gambo, Chief of the Naval Staff, on behalf of officers, ratings and civilian staff of the Nigerian Navy, cordially welcome all our invited distinguished guests to the Presidential Fleet Review 2023 with the theme Fleet Readiness for National Prosperity. We are also honored to be hosting His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, Grand Commander of the Federal Republic, who will review the recapitalized Nigerian Navy fleets and commission several platforms recently acquired during his administration. This and many others undoubtedly will poise the Nigerian Navy to support the federal government's sustainable development of our blue economy.
The event will hold on Friday 19th to Monday 22nd May 2023. Some key activities during the period are the Maritime Discourse on Saturday 20th May 2023 and Presidential Fleet Review proper on Monday 22nd May 2023. All at the Naval Dockyard Limited, Victoria Island, Lagos by 9 a.m. daily. Nigerian Navy, onward together.
Nigeria's vast underutilized blue economy offers huge opportunities for growth and development. The blue economy, according to experts, is the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth and improved livelihoods, whilst preserving the health of ocean ecosystems. For Nigeria, the blue economy offers a whole new vista of opportunity for economic activity, especially in areas close to the ocean. With increasing awareness and efforts aimed at exploring the huge benefits inherent in the sea, the federal government, through its agencies, what is out there in the nation's waters. Stock of what she has in terms of what job creation, growth of coastal communities, enhanced transportation of humans and cargo potentials, renew and sustain the environment, reduce poverty, and make the nation competitive by maximizing its competitive oceanic advantages. It is on this premise that the hydrographic survey and dredging of sea routes are important activities to gather accurate and up-to-date information about the depth, shape, and features of the seabed. This data helps in creating nautical charts and maps that are essential for safe navigation of ships and vessels. Dredging involves removing sediment, silt, and other materials from the seabed to maintain or deepen the navigational channel, ensuring that ships can pass through without running aground or encountering any obstructions. On Thursday, 11th May 2023, history was made in Imo State when the Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo flagged off an economic transformation project, the hydrographic survey and dredging of sea route from Oguta Lake to the Atlantic Ocean. Present at ceremony held at the Naval Base Oguta were the Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Rabo, the Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Awa Zubairu Gambo, and the Minister for Trade and Investment, Chief Ni Adebayo. The Oni of Ife, Oba Adeye Ogunwosi Oniton, the Obi of Onitsha, His Royal Majesty Alfred Nnaemeka Achebe, the Eze Imo, His Royal Majesty E.C. Okeke, and a host of other monarchs were also present at the flag-off ceremony. The survey, which is a clearance of the entire route from Oguta Lake to Orashi River to Degema and the Atlantic Ocean, was initiated by Governor Hope Uzodinma to open up the economic corridor in the southeast and enhance maritime security in the Niger Delta region. Executed under a partnership with the Nigerian Navy and a consortium of international companies, essentially a private-public partnership arrangement. The Vice President expressed delight, noting that the project was approved by President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR.
It's a very special pleasure for me to join you at this historic flag-off of the hydrographic survey and dredging of the proposed sea route from Oguta Lake, Orashi, Degema to the Atlantic Ocean. This project is a vital collaboration between the state government, the Nigerian Navy, and a consortium of technical partners. It was initiated and approved under the stewardship of President Muhammadu Buhari and Governor Hope Uzodinma.
He said the project is to revive the economic channels and enhance coastal connectivity and ensure security on the stretch of the two rivers, opening up to the Atlantic Ocean.
Today, we aim to revive this once vibrant and economically strategic channel, furthering job creation and sustainable growth in Imo State and the entire southeast region, and indeed our nation. By enhancing coastal connectivity and facilitating seamless transportation, the project will promote trade and investment and spur growth in multiple sectors, including shipping, manufacturing, agriculture, and also offer numerous opportunities for the people.
Adding that the project, when completed, will offer economic opportunities to the host community